representatives, if you guys would like to get started, introduce yourselves, and then we'll take it from there.
Perfect. My name's Jake Johns. I represent House District 113 out western North Carolina, and I chair our IT committee up here in Raleigh.
Matthew Winslow in North Carolina House, House District 7, just north here of Wake County, and I chair IT with Jake.
Justin Hill with NetChoice, the Right of Center trade association for tech companies around the United States.
I'm Taylor Barkley, Director of Public Policy at the Abundance Institute. We're a brand new think tank headquartered in Utah with offices in Washington, D.C. And we are relentlessly optimistic about technology. Our public policy work is focused on making sure emerging technologies can thrive. That we work in particular in the areas of artificial intelligence and energy tech.
Going to be a lot of disagreement on this panel, guys. Rob Crowdy with Amazon.
And I'm Bartlett Klon, General Counsel at NetChoice, and your moderator for today. In other words, these guys know everything. As was just pointed out to me by Rep. Winslow, I'm just here as a high kid. So, there you go.
Keep it up, Bartlett.
I found out Bartlett was a lawyer just now.
I'll take that as a co-lawyer. All right. So, well, thank you for having us here. Every one of us, very happy to be here and happy to share some of our thoughts with you. And you give up part of your day to be here. I realize time is always precious and valuable. So you already heard that NetChoice is the tech trade association, and we represent and fight for free expression and free enterprise online. So you will not see us taking a liberal position on anything, which is why we end up talking to a whole lot of conservative caucuses around the country. Can we stand by those free market principles, not only in legislation, but in what we do? We have a great panel today, and we're going to talk about AI, artificial intelligence, and data centers. And we're going to go in that order, a little bit walking the cat backwards from the software world into the hardware world, where things might be a little familiar or unfamiliar. So with that, let's do a quick level set. How many people here know what AI is? Okay, keep your hand up if you really, really know what AI is. Okay, data centers. How many people here know what data centers are? You keep your hand up if you really know what data centers are. All right, good. There you go, guys. That gives you some idea of, yeah, show off. That gives you some idea of where we should go. So we're going to get to this quickly. Our goal is to reserve plenty of time for Q&A, so please start thinking of those questions. The goal is to get you real comfortable with these topics and to allow us to share our thoughts on how North Carolina can continue to be a leader in these spaces. So, Representative Johnson, let's go to you first. Hard not to call you Jay, I just learned your last name.
Yeah.
All right. You are seen both in this state and outside this state as a leader in technology. I know that from ALEC, but amongst other organizations as well. You not only understand it, but you also have an eye on how innovations can help your state, and you leverage here in North Carolina. So we had a great conversation the other day where you rattle off a whole bunch of ideas. What are you hoping to see discussed next year in the legislature, or as you was lead up to the legislature?
Well, let me start out by saying that this is new for everyone. This is an emerging technology. It's changing every single day. So when this first came about, we first started talking together about putting together an AI reg reform bill. When we first started talking to the developers, the people actually in the weeds on it, I said, explain it to me how you would a small child or a golden retriever or something. And so they really started at an elementary level to get us to where we understood kind of enough of the back end of it to be dangerous to where we could start talking about policy that made sense. So when we're putting together this bill, we have one simple goal. We wanted to state that up front. We want to make North Carolina the most AI-friendly state in the country. We mean that for developers, people implementing the technology, and from constituents using it from a customer service perspective when they're interacting with the state. That's all part of it. And the curriculum that we want to put together to where, when I'm talking to these companies, it's not our, that they love the tax structure here. They, on the data center side, we're actually a lot better off, well positioned than a lot of states. It's the education piece and making sure they got people that can develop and come here and be part of the ecosystem. So we're putting together a bill right now that we want to protect these developers from frivolous lawsuits is the first one. We see that as a huge issue going forward. This is a tool. You know, it is not meant to fully replace the brains behind it. But if we open this thing up to frivolous lawsuits, that's the quickest way for developers to not live in North Carolina anymore. And when we're talking to these companies that are headquartered in California or another state, they want to be here. We just have to give them a reason to come here and relocate. And I think that's what this bill is going to do by limiting the liability, focusing on the education piece, and being really common sense that we can regulate ourselves out of being a hotspot really quick. And if we overregulate, I can promise China's not. So we are putting ourselves at a huge international disadvantage if we go one step too far.
Is that going to be your bill?
Yes, so we're still working on that now. The one thing we didn't want to do is send it over too early. When things get outside of your control, you don't know what happens when you pass them along. So we're going to keep it in the House as long as we can, get it perfect. We've had stakeholder meetings already that went extremely well, and we took a lot away from it. They've implemented that in the bill. But just think about the definitions. High-risk data. That seems pretty cut and dry. I guarantee there are 10 different definitions in 10 states of what high-risk data is. I think we would agree facial recognition, get in your bank account. That's probably pretty high risk if that were to get hacked. But there are 10 different definitions for 10 states that have passed it. So just honing in those definitions are very important for a judge looking at it maybe a decade from now.
So my takeaway is, hold it in the House, don't trust the Senate. So this is a great way to segue over you, Taylor. So first of all, Taylor's with the Abundance Institute, as he said. If you haven't looked at their website, please do.
Abundance.institute.
Thank you.
We had to be a little creative.
Fantastic organization that breeds abundance as opposed to scarcity, and it totally changes one's point of view on the world when you think that way. But Taylor, would you start with, give us, I know it's going to be really hard to define AI, so I'm not going to put you on that spot, but give us some thoughts about why it's hard to define AI. Explain a little bit what AI is, and then you have some other points you wanted to address. On to this, but I wanted to ask that beginning.
Love it. Rep Johnson, I love your question to the developers. Explain it like you would to a Golden Bear. Yes. That's my level too. And I think there are a few things I guess I want to convey on this question, Bartlett. 4 things in particular. So AI is turned as 70 years young. So we're here on this panel. It's a hot topic because of ChatGPT 3.5's release in November of 2022. This blew everyone's mind. It surprised developers and close observers of the industry because this large language model, a particular kind of AI, did so well in natural language processing and interaction. It didn't require fancy computer science degrees to operate it. It was just a chat box window. And this just caught everyone off guard. It did exceptionally well at that, and improvements have been gaining ever since, and that's why we're here talking about AI now. The term itself goes back to the mid-1950s, where a group of researchers got together and said, we're going to get computers to basically operate like a human brain in summer. Obviously, that did not happen, but it started this field of artificial intelligence that's been going on ever since. We were 70 years. And I also want to say artificial intelligence is not just one thing. AI tools are, I mean, there's probably hundreds if not millions of them. They're all over the place, mundane things that we've gotten used to, like Waze directions or Google Maps. If you put 2 addresses in and it maps through different traffic, that's a kind of artificial intelligence. At one point, chess games were a type of AI. Researchers thought no computer could never surpass a human player at the game of Go, and that happened. And over and over. And I think there's this phrase that was actually coined by one of the earlier researchers that, once we call something AI until it starts working, and then it's just computers. And I think that's the other point I want to convey too, is artificial intelligence it's advanced computing. I mean, it's a term that we apply to this type of computing because often users can interact with it in using natural language, voice, text, speech. But it's also spitting out, information, data that is surprising, images, videos, sounds, and text as well. So it has this kind of creativity, but it's, of course, these computers possible because chips have become so advanced and the amount of data that we can collect has become so vast. These systems are large language models, ChatGPT, Gemini, off and on. They're trained on the internet. So we think of these advanced computers as kind of the average of the internet, and that's a handy way of thinking about it. And then on the definition thing, maybe to wrap up this first point of what AI is, definitions are really, really wobbly. I've seen a few kind of coalesce around a national definition. That's one of the defense authorizations in, I think, 2020, but even that's not perfect. And my colleague, Neil Shilson, he's a computer scientist and a lawyer, and he says the leading textbook on AI has a whole chapter devoted to how AI is really tough to define. So even the computer scientists can't agree. So in the public policy context, where you have to hold people legally liable, it's even tougher. So maybe the next part of your question, Bartle, is what can North Carolina do to lead? And I love that framing. And there's so much at stake here. There's so much opportunity. Artificial intelligence is applying a new way of advanced computing and intelligence, frankly, to processes and things that used to lack that. So we're going to unlock all sorts of new time, new economic opportunity for small businesses and big businesses and individuals as well. So some quick tips here. Enforce current laws. Most of the time, no new regulation is needed for artificial intelligence. Current laws apply. Because here's a handy tip that I apply whenever I read a bill that is for AI. Every time I see the phrase AI in the bill, I swap out Excel or computers. And often that changes how the bill would apply. And I think that's how we should be thinking about AI. So if I'm using AI to maybe commit crimes against Bartlett, I will be held accountable, no matter the technology I use. The second principle, let entrepreneurs and citizens create and deploy. Let the economy do its thing. Third, use AI responsibly in government. I think state governments can lead the way through example. And there, the regulatory framework shifts. Transparency is good in the government context to make sure civil liberties are protected and respected. I'll say fourth, welcome infrastructure build-out and investments. These advanced computers need a lot of compute. These big buildings, these data centers, maybe we should call them supercomputers instead, because a lot's happening more than just data storage for management. But there's a lot of work to be done here, and this is where the energy policy stuff gets into the discussion. And then finally, there are some proactive things one can do. There's some exciting things happening across the country. The Montana has passed a Right to Clean Act, which essentially is kind of, think of it like a Second Amendment for the use of computers. There are bills that make explicit, it's illegal to create child sexual abuse material with AI generative tools. There are bills that would say the legislature could pass that would just make it explicit, like, hey, civil liberty or what am I thinking of? Anti-discrimination, discriminatory conduct is illegal still, even just to make it super clear. Happy to rattle off about 5 or so others, but there are model policies out there, and we're happy to connect you with those. And I left one handout as a final tool, kind of a cheat sheet, the questions you should ask if you get a bill on your desk or you're thinking about it yourself, and some handy numbers for the kind of economic impact that these tools will have.
Thank you very much. All right, so you mentioned advanced computing. So advanced computing is going to take forward, you mentioned the energy, you mentioned the chips. What we haven't expressed directly yet is that computing is no longer taking place, sorry to break this to you guys, it's not happening on your phone. It's not happening on your computer, your laptop for the most part. It's not even down the hall in the closet. Everyone remember the old server closets, right? Some strange guy would come in every a couple days and open the closet, and a big heat wave would roll out and you'd see a bunch of flashing lights. They're now taking place in data centers. Data centers are gigantic, to make it real easy, gigantic server closets where people work 24/7 to keep the data flowing and the computing happening. So with that, Representative Winslow, I know you've thought a lot about data centers here in North Carolina. What have you been thinking about keeping North Carolina as leader in those data centers? And I know you mentioned to me a couple of the objections you've heard and how those drive us both a little nuts. So feel free to take those on too.
I want to think about data centers. I think people misunderstand the purpose of a data center, right? And you're right, everybody's thinking about the old closets. You remember back in the day when I would buy 1 megabyte drives and stack them in the closet, and everybody's like, ooh, you got a megabyte. You know, supercomputer, this, you're launching the Death Star from around this section. But I had someone that was a great explanation, said, you know, somebody asked the question, you know, what do you need data center for? And everybody goes straight to AI. I mean, it is a big user of data centers. But think about every email you send, every photo on your phone, right? You text it to somebody, you email somebody, it gets sent to a group of 20 people. You just multiply it times 20 times. And then they send it to somewhere else 20 times, you know, and it never goes. It's there forever. Who in this room goes to their phone and just deletes off all their pictures and starts over? No one. So it stays in a cloud all the time. You just keep adding more, and then every time you send a picture to somebody else, it gets multiplied. And so that's really one of the biggest users of our data is just through emails, cell phones, the data that we use every single day, it gets multiplied. Then you have everything up to national security. I mean, national security is a big thing we're pushing right now. So whoever wins the race in AI for national security will be the future superpower war. You know, and so it takes energy, it takes time, it takes understanding. One of the things to talk about was, you know, regulation. Was that we're talking about regulation, and I'm on the far end of like saying that we shouldn't be doing any regulation because regulation stifles innovation. Period. If electricity was invented, we started throwing in blockades and said, we don't know about electricity. That's dangerous. It's scary. We like oil and hanging on. Well, where would we be at? Rockets. I mean, if you go back, I love the space race. I love reading about it and learning about it and everything else. And you know, back in the day when that space race, they didn't have a bunch of regulations in place. They said, light on fire, set to the moon. You know, and that was our motto, right? And if we had put all these safeguards and everything in place, we would be where we're at today. We would be a superpower today because of it. So I feel the same thing about AI, is that we need to make sure we're deregulating. You know, we've got a lot of regulations already in the books of coverage for all the things that, already, we know better than,
Right.
You know, but and we may take it too far, and when we do, we'll figure out what that is, and we'll come back. That's just the nature of things. So,
I think that's a good idea for a lot of policies I hear. Light them on fire and send them to the moon. So, Justice, now, you have spent the last couple of years going around the country as a former legislator, talking to current legislators, all who are trying to figure out how to lure data centers to their states. What has been your experience talking to them, both what they're doing and then also what are data centers looking for in the states? What makes a state the right place to get them?
Thanks, brother. There is life after the legislature. I don't know how many are elected in this room, but yeah. But it's been great going around the country talking to fellow former colleagues about this issue because it's on the front end of everything in every state. Every industry touches a data center now. Every state is different. It's good to hear states like North Carolina are having conversations like this. This is actually being replicated around the country right now. Montana's got something started up pretty soon. Florida, there's a bill going to be filed in January. Well, probably already is to summer. I'm sorry. It's going to be like a right to compute act, but to attract AI development in their state. So it's as a microcosm on the international race to AI. It's going on in the states, which is funny. Last year, all the lawmakers were starting to freak out because the bad headlines over we're running out of electricity and we're running out of water. We can't build these big ugly data centers. That literally, I was hitting a wall in every state last year. And something happened around August this year. Maybe it was a little guidance from the federal government, but now all of a sudden, lawmakers saying, how do we get this data center infrastructure and development into my state? They want to be left in the dark, right? I think a lot of rural states right now are seeing this as an opportunity to kind of reinvigorate rural parts of their state. You know, it's towns that were really good education is propping up good students, but then they leave and they don't come back, right? Because everything is turning to technology. And now there's an opportunity, if you bring a data center into a rural community that has not seen growth in ages, these companies are investing in that community because they are incentivized to make sure the kids that live there are educated. I mean, we're talking $100,000 a year jobs for high school graduates if they're willing to live in that location. You know, so I love that the tide is turning. It's fun to see which state will get there first. Historically speaking, North Carolina has been a leader. In the last 5 years, North Carolina has focused on innovation, tech in general. Every time we see a bad bill come up, NetChoice is usually one of the first to call some lawmakers and say, hey, pump the brakes a little bit. They've tried this in this state. It didn't go so well. North Carolina has always taken that with a grain of salt, So it's great. I hope you guys can beat Florida. Yeah. Florida's going to be... DeSantis lately, he's been actually tweeting about energy prices and blaming data centers. But new reports had literally just come out this week that said, listen, it's not data centers that's creating this increase in energy costs to the ratepayer. It's actually things like, what was number one? It was infrastructure, aging infrastructure. We're 50 years behind. Where China has been investing in infrastructure for decades, we have a different system. It's been a challenge to upgrade transmission. So that was number one. Number two was green mandates. I don't think North Carolina maybe a little bit. I think I saw North Carolina, was right at the line, a little bit above. But states like California, New York, Maine, solar and wind is not going to power a data center. It just isn't. We're going to need a lot of electrons very quickly. And number three, water is still a concern for a lot of states. I don't think you have that problem here. You have plenty of water. But a lot of people don't know. It's just on the education piece too, right? A lot of people don't know that a data center loses the same amount of evaporation as a golf course, as a cornfield in the Midwest. But bad headlines really get the NIMBYism pumped up. Right? In St. Louis recently, it made national headlines actually. There was a big data center development proposed, and a local billionaire didn't want to look off his back dead and see a data center. He lives on a bluff of the river, didn't want to see the data center, so he funded a campaign to drum up NIMBYism. And NIMBYism actually speaks to people very easily. So it's really on lawmakers to get educated on the realities of what it's going to take to bring this innovation into the state, what's really true about energy prices and water usage, and to actually educate their constituents, right? Because listen, I had to do it. It's hard to vote on an issue where it's the right thing, but you're going to catch a lot of hell from your constituents simply because they just don't know the facts.
So I have latched onto this because I find it to be very clever. NIMBYism has morphed in the last few months. As Republicans have gotten better, the other side's gotten worse. We now refer to it as bananas. Build absolutely nothing anywhere near any faith. And that is, so it's a little anti-developing crowd, right? So they've all coalesced to fight data centers. All right, so we've talked about a lot of coming legislation, what looks good in legislation, what looks good in theory, what has been talked about in other states. At the end of the day, the rubber must hit the road. So tell me, why does AWS think North Carolina? Why invest here? What attracted you guys, and how is the experience to you?
Yeah, it's a big question, and I think it touches on a lot of what we've talked about, what I've heard. By the way, it's really nice to be on a panel where you don't feel the tension headache mounting. The other day, West Bay, that's right, I need to remember that thing. So I think it's a couple of things, right? To what Representative Johnson said, what Representative Winslow said, like, the environment matters a lot, right? So that's both the regulatory environment, but it's also the talent environment, right? North Carolina, world-class university, community college system. We know the talent is here and it's available. We know that state government is a place that has been interested, and candidly in a bipartisan way, in things that we can all agree on. Workforce development, economic development, big projects like the one we just announced. These are things that predominantly we can all kind of get behind, and where frankly we need to continue to see leadership from the legislature to keep pushing things in the correct direction. We've seen other states have regulated their way out of being able to think about these investments. But when I take a step back, I went and looked at the numbers before I came today, and the size of the scope and impact are pretty crazy. So North Carolina is an important state for us. It's always been an important state for Amazon. Since 2012, we've invested $12 billion in the state. The project we announced a couple months ago is a $10 billion project on its own.
Well,
So it's going to create 500 jobs, and those 500 jobs are just our jobs. That's not even the construction jobs, the jobs for plumbers, electricians that are going to be coming from, frankly, the surrounding counties and then some to work on that scale of a project. And by the way, that's on a 700-acre site that the state and the utility have been working diligently to develop for years, and that we wanted to see that investment become a reality. And so there's been a lot of work done already. We're already doing some great work with development stuff with the local community colleges. We're already doing some great hiring, the training. People are already being put to work there. That's great. But then when I take a further step back, and some of what we're talking about here when it comes to how North Carolina can continue to be a leader, how many of you are familiar with the street light fallacy? Okay, so guy's had a couple of drinks, he's wandering around, and he loses his keys. And a cop sees him. Cop comes up to him and says, "Hey buddy, what's going on?" And the guy says, "Hey, I've lost my keys. Can you help me look for them under the street light?" And the cop says, "Sure, did you drop them here?" And he says, "No, I dropped them back in the park, but this is where the light is." And the purpose of that fallacy is that often the thing that is shining attention on is not really the problem or where the interest is. It's not really the thing you should be focused on. So right now there's a lot of conversation around data centers and energy and around cost and all that sort of thing. And Justin's right, like, not to let the data get in the way of a good story. But what we found predominantly is that when you look at markets, look at North Dakota, you just seen a 40% increase in demand for energy, but it's actually seen a decrease in prices. Go just north of y'all, where I live in Virginia, right? Virginia is the data center capital of the world, and on a per kilowatt hour basis, the price has actually gone down for ratepayers. So as we're thinking about this, and Bart, to come back to your question around like, what do we think about when we think about investing in North Carolina and how North Carolina can continue to be a leader? I think it comes back to one, understanding that the regulatory environment is important, but it's not the whole ball game. So it's all of this other important stuff like how is the state embracing AI? How is state government thinking about other regulations? Is this a business-friendly state environment, which good as is because of the work for a lot of people in this room, it is and continues to be. And then, do we have people that are ready to work? Do we have people that are ready to move into those jobs? Those 500 jobs, by the way, are 500 jobs for engineers and folks that do stuff that, frankly, made my brain hurt because I'm just a public policy guy. But those are 500 people that we want either to stay in Richmond County, or we want them to come and be a part of that community in a new and exciting way, right? Like, I'll just leave you with this, that I was talking to a guy from one of the community colleges down there, and he was talking about his son who had just bought a house in Western Maryland. And the guy was telling me he could not believe that his son spent $400,000 on a house. And that was the big takeaway. He was like, he and his wife were a little crazy. They spent $400,000. If he had just stayed here in Richmond County, he could have got a really nice house for half that. And I looked at him and I said, yeah, but what does he do for work? And that became the problem. So for us, when we think about these projects, yes, it's what makes AI possible. It's what makes it possible so that when UNC or Duke, sometimes even when they do stuff together, is doing really cutting edge AI stuff, or NC State, all of that's built on infrastructure that we hope more and more is also infrastructure that is in North Carolina, because we see the benefits that extend beyond just what happens for the consumer. I'll stop there.
Great. All right, we have some time for questions. You guys would have lots of time to brew up some questions. So, what do you got? Well, actually, let me see. How many people now know what AI is? How many people are sure they could define AI?
Guys, if you don't ask questions, Bartlett's going to treat it like first year of law school. He's just going to start calling on
Hell yeah. We'll do Socratic guys. All right, nobody. How many people know what a data center is? What's all right? All right, good. Well, this was the intent in part, thinking about this. All right, questions. That means you must have questions, because you don't even know what we're talking about.
I have a question for the crowd.
Go ahead, man.
How many of you, be honest, how many of you still have last year's 4th of July fireworks on your wall? Come on. Yep. Have you guys watched them since the 4th of July? Right? So that what gets a rise out of people all the time, because what Representative Winslow said is we don't delete it, right? It reminds me of this funny story. So I was working in the South. I can't dime out the state, but I had a meeting with the Department of Commerce secretary because they just weren't familiar with data centers too much. And they were causing problems with their ability to pass a bill to incentivize data center development. And he looked me in the eye and says, I don't want data centers that only store photos and videos. I couldn't believe he said that. I mean, because this whole panel is absolutely right. That investment will turn into AI development in your state. I mean, that is very short-sighted, right? Yes, we're going to store the internet in data centers, but guess what? Search is now being replaced by AI. So when we used to go on google.com and search something up, now most people are starting to go to AI and ask questions, and then AI searches the web for you and gives you the best response according to what it's learned about the prompts that you put in. So a lot's changing, don't be short-sighted.
I had this great experience driving through Nebraska and was bored because it was kind of a long drive to the middle of Nebraska. So I literally just started talking to my phone and asking all about Nebraska. I learned more about the state. It was just feeding me tons of stuff. I'm like, well, what are the crops here? It's telling you what the crops are and where they sell them and what the cash amount is to the state and what their total export is. I learned a ton about Nebraska. So you're right, search is no longer doing this. It's just they're talking, and that's all being.
That's why I'm going road trips with Bartlett. That's why. It's just, be asking me if we didn't have it.
That is absolutely, and I think they'll be answered.
Or you're out. One thing I was going to point out, one of our colleagues, Representative Eric Beret here in Wake County, she has done a fantastic job on the workforce side of this. We've historically been great at economic development, but we've got to step up the game as the workforce development with emerging industries. We've heard it straight from AWS here today that workforce is a big part of that. She actually had a bill here that required at least gave the option of computer science in that K-12 curriculum. And that is a direct feeder to the data science programs we are funding at the community college level and the university system. But these other countries that are trying to get ahead of us in AI, they are starting kids out at a very young age, learning the code, learning the engineering side of it. So the fact that we were falling behind in that, a lot of credit to her for getting that implemented in our curriculum.
Rob, I have a question for you. Here we go. Yes, sir.
So I don't mean it started to our conversation, but how does Bitcoin fit into office? Because that's a different sort of data center, right? It's a data lane. I know less about it when you know about AI or data.
Yeah, it's a really good question because I think this is one area where the existing language has kind of failed us a little bit, right? So most Bitcoin mining operations are set up a little differently than traditional data centers. And that has to do with the kind of compute that they need. So when you think of data center, there are different kinds of data centers, but Bitcoin generally, the compute that's needed for those and the way that those are set up infrastructure-wise are generally less permanent. And they have a different set of energy needs, and candidly, they're their own interesting thing. And I wouldn't begin to speak on behalf of the Bitcoin industry. If we have anyone here from the Bitcoin industry, we should talk after. But what I've found here is that it's really critical that data centers in particular is a term that will get used as kind of an umbrella term. But even within our industry, there are different kinds of data centers, right? So, for example, we are what are called a hyperscaler data center, right? So part of what we do is for Amazon, because we have this whole other business that sends you packages every day. You might have heard of it, right? So, Amazon's been using artificial intelligence for 20 years, and all of Amazon's functions and compute functions run on AWS, right? So we have our own big customer, but then we also have separate customers that when you go and stream Netflix later tonight, that's done on AWS, right? So we have customers that we treat that way. Other kinds of data centers, for example, will have different customers that use their servers, basically rent their servers in a way that's totally different. And then Bitcoin generally operates outside of that system. And they generally run their own, I'm not even sure data center is the right word for it. It's they run their own sort of network of computers depending on energy availability and also some other technological factors. So they're related, but they're pretty separate in terms of how the infrastructure works.
And everyone here, anytime you go downtown to any downtown, here they're probably separate. You see the building that has no windows? That's probably a co-location facility. The local bank, the local merchant, whatever they've rented. If any of you are familiar with the old telecommunications co-location where you go and have cages around the park that is yours, that's what those data centers look like. So they look very different than, say, an AWS data center where you probably see pictures just rows and rows of racks filled with servers. Those are the hyperscale guys who we represent. So I don't have the co-location guys. And they have a whole set, to your point, a whole set of additional and also interesting issues that fortunately I just don't have to handle. But they are also important in this whole network.
One quick note, maybe the difference is like the types of services they're fulfilling are quite different, so the needs and demands are different. So if we're running a cryptocurrency mining operation, you can run that when energy is cheap, perhaps, when it makes sense to mine free the cryptocurrency, or if you're processing transactions, as opposed to say Netflix or like one of these AI services. Those need to be running like 24/7 all the time. So demand, that's based on the consumer perhaps, and it's a little less, malleable perhaps, than like the types of computers we're talking about.
Who's telling me the time? How much longer do we have? Somebody. I don't remember.
I think 5 p.m. was the word I said.
We got totally. We got 2 more questions. Easy. Let's go.
Yeah, I just want to point out that we're 18 years, 20 years into, I think we have 3 hyperscalers in North Carolina. First one built 18, 19 years ago here. We have a lot of experience with data centers and what they bring to the local communities they're in. They're the largest taxpayer, give away billions of dollars and support local communities. So I'm not sure why we have a concern other than the scale of a data center may get bigger and those concerns are raised. But I mean, we have great examples of successful data centers that have ingrained themselves in communities that show a net value from jobs, investment, tax base, et cetera.
Yeah, hard to disagree with that, because I think that's right. I think that what you're saying raises another interesting question of competition, which is it's easier to build stuff where you already have stuff, right? Now, this can lead to some challenges. You may or may not have heard, Northern Virginia has gotten a little more crowded over the last 20 years, and it turns out it's a lot harder to build stuff. So when companies our size paying a couple $1 million an acre for data center land in Northern Virginia, that gets really complicated really quickly. And it's not because it's a great place to build stuff because there's no one there or anything like that. It's because the industry and the infrastructure exist. So as North Carolina thinks about its competitive advantage in any industry, but especially this one, I think it's worth double clicking on this thought around how can we lean in on the investments that have already been made and make sure that we're maximizing those. So like our project down in Richmond County is great, but it can't be the only thing. And it shouldn't be, right? Like other companies will see that because we've seen how these markets go. And they'll say, oh, if Amazon's jumping in the water must be fine. And so this question of like, how do we make it possible so that there's a flywheel effect and that North Carolina can show compared to other states, and by the way, including other states with conservative legislatures that have made some strange policy decisions or have tried, and we've helped them hopefully see the light. But I think that's a key thing, which is that understanding these ecosystems build on one another.
For the legislators, what have you heard in the legislature generally? Is there general support in North Carolina? No, I'm talking about elsewhere. In North Carolina for data centers? And then the second part, what have you heard from localities? What we have found is a lot of times, back to Representative Winslow, your point, is a lot of times locality that becomes the problem when they're having their community meetings.
In the legislature, probably, there's 107 members, 168 of them probably don't care and don't even involved. There's 2 of them that,
And who are those? You know, you knew the
and we're in trouble if he calls the gurus. Locally, I've got local members on my board of commissioners in my local towns that are asking me, how do we get a data center? Because they hear about the benefits. I can tell you that I do see a lot on social media about, the old style data centers are loud and noisy, take up a lot of space, they're energy hogs, those kind of things. But just as information technology is advancing rapidly to AI, the physical hard technology is changing very quickly. Someone, I forgot who told me that in 3 years we're going to be at half the use of power, but he couldn't twice the amount of data at the same spots. That's how quickly the technology is changing. And so they're doing things like air-cooled ones now, so they have water-cooled ones. And so, if we have offset the energy costs and they use air-cooled instead. So I think a lot of the major concerns about data center will fix themselves shortly over time so that you don't have quite the objections that you get before.
And I'll also add to that we see a lot of our broadband providers in the room. It's not only important to have a reliable broadband and that takes up about 99% of my time up here, especially during certain times of the year, is it helps make us more feasible as a location to move to, but it also creates a more feasible customer base. And that is huge. Nobody wants to come somewhere where there's not a customer base to actually use the product. So it helps us on the front end and the back end. And it is going to be an education battle across the state. We talk about data centers in these localities of that tax base and that tax rate have to equal out at some point. If you've got one going down and the other one's not going up, we've got a problem. So those have to, at the end of the day, so many of our rural communities are losing tax base. They are losing tax base. You can look at school enrollment as a good indicator. They are losing people moving there. And there may be some areas where there's a spike in retirees moving there, but a lot of these are losing population altogether. When you are losing that tax base, if you do not find a way to supplement that by bringing something like a data center in, that rate will eventually have to go up, and that's when the citizens still there are going to start to feel it.
It's amazing you say that. It's been one of the most interesting parts of what NetChoice does is watching as mainly governors, but the secretaries of commerce, et cetera, the light goes off, and the rural play, just as you explained, for data centers becomes so obvious to them suddenly. And I think of Louisiana, where the governor is a huge fan, and he's like, I've got this northeastern part of the state where there's nothing going on, but I've got a lot of land. I'll make somebody a sweet deal that they'll put in a data center, and within a few weeks of getting all the legislation worked out, he gets a data center that's going to be built up there for people who are not particularly well educated, and there's not a whole lot of people up in the first place. He said directly, I can't handle a 3,000 employee car assembly plant. That's not what fits in that space. So it fits. Data centers fit in certain places. They don't necessarily fit everywhere.
I think I would add to Representative Johnson's point, when I think about data centers, right? Like, anyone know where the most data centers in the world are located? Anyone know what county? Anyone who does not on stage who does this for a living? Anyone?
Fairfax.
Anyone know? Sorry.
Under Fairfax.
Loudoun County. That's exactly right. Loudoun County has more data centers than anywhere in the world. It still represents, I forget the exact percentage, the total percentage of their land is like vanishingly small that actually use data centers. Loudoun County is the wealthiest county in America. It's one of the best educated counties in America. It's an increasingly Democratic county. And you know what they've done for the last 10 years? They've reduced their taxes. Like, the property tax rate in Loudoun County has gone down, even as the value of the properties continues to go up. They build world-class schools, and it's because something like half of their operating budget comes from data center taxes.
Yeah, the last JLAB report was almost 800, or right at $800 billion.
Yeah.
That almost covered all of their K-12 expenses.
Right. So I say all that to say that, Mike, when I think about two very different places culturally and economically, right? Loudoun County, which is the wealthiest county in America, that's home to most of DC's elite and just a whole bunch of horse farms and more data centers than anywhere in the world. And I think of Richmond County, which is an awesome place to call home, and that, you know, primarily I knew because of NASCAR before really starting to do North Carolina stuff, and that is a county that is really rural and is not fancy horse country. Those two places are both good fits for data centers for different reasons. And so I would encourage everyone to be thinking about, as a state and then in localities, like there are different ways that localities and states can be competitive. There's not a single model for, we can only ask people to build data centers here. It's about finding the confluence of all of the things that people here are talking about.
Right, we had one more question. Was that you?
I'll take it.
Sure, it's you.
Well, thanks, Mark. And I think to Doug's point, whether it's Google of Lenore or Facebook in Forest City, Meta in Forest City now, AWS, which we count as fantastic to see. And for Duke Energy, I know we're going to hold you guys accountable some part to make sure that what we're building for you, you're paying your fair share. Sure. At least in Northbound, that's part of the concern. What I'd love to hear from you, Rob, is a little deeper dive, what were some of the characteristics AWS looked to? Because I want our policymakers to know, okay, this is what the hyperscalers are looking for their considerations to invest $10 billion in binary data. Can you go a little deeper? What I need to see in North Carolina that we want to make sure we're marketing to other
Sure.
hyperscalers?
Yeah, and it's a bunch of things. I think it starts really with energy availability, right? When we look at places that we are thinking, like when you think about what a $10 billion investment actually is, and by the way, $10 billion is the floor, which is pretty wild to think about. I don't know. I grew up poor in Queens. The idea of $10 billion is like saying a cajillion dollars. It doesn't. I say the number, and like I know the number, and I've had people explain to me what all those numbers actually, how it all goes in. I've had smarter people like literally draw me a picture, and the number still seems wild to me. So it starts with energy availability, right? Do we have capacity? Does the utility in a place have the available capacity? Frankly, also, are we having to fight tooth and nail with the utility and with a legislature over dumb energy regulation?
Yeah.
We've had to do that in some places, and it's a problem, and let's just say that's a problem. So energy availability is the first thing, right? We do think about the more in the weeds energy stuff like rate structures, which obviously, like, to be honest, we believe pretty strongly we should be paying our fair share. We also believe, by the way, that for infrastructure that is only for us, like things like substations, frankly, companies of our size, we should have to pay for our own substations. So we do. Also, it's faster, which is nice, but like, candidly, like, we don't mind spending tens of millions of dollars on substations because we think that should be our responsibility, not the ratepayers. And then when we think about other stuff, fiber availability and the ability to both have fiber, whether it's existing or to be able to build it out. North Carolina, in a lot of ways, is blessed by geography, and that we can do those fiber runs, and they're possible. You start going a little further west, that gets a little challenging geographically, but like it's something that I think eventually might become a thing. And then we think about workforce. The truth is that we have a VP of economic development who runs our global economic development stuff. And the thing that blows his mind, that continues to blow my mind, is we were doing a project in Mississippi, and they went there, and he got on site and he asked the foreman for the contractor of a rundown of who was on the site at the time. And On that day, we had 2,000 electricians on the site. Just electricians in Mississippi. Those folks have to come from somewhere. And so as we think about markets that we want to invest in that kind of money in, we also think about stuff like, to Representative Johnson's point, like, is the state doing a good job of skilling up its folks, right? Is the state a job that's investing in economic development sites? By the way, you all have done a pretty good job with that part of it. Are there sites being developed? Is the infrastructure there? So I'll stop there, but I think the big thing, to Kevin's point, is really understanding that if you think that a company is going to invest $10 billion in a place just because of a state tax break, I think it fundamentally misunderstands how companies like us think holistically about where we put our time and money, and frankly, where we're going to be for a while. Because you don't invest $10 billion and then 3 or 4 years later, you're like, oh, well, that didn't work. You can't pull the stakes up out of the tent. It's infrastructure. It's going to be there for a minute.
I've heard all of you, my viewers, say a version of, if not exactly, we want to go where we're welcomed with open arms.
Yeah.
And I think in a phrase that kind of puts it together. All right, so for the representatives, either of you have any final thoughts? And if not, tell us how to find out more about you. Give us your websites.
We're easy to find. Just if you want to look at what we're voting on, I'd suggest don't just read the headlines. Go straight to the General Assembly website, read the bill for yourself. But we're both easy to track down. Want to be a resource for everybody. And thank you for being here.
Thank you for being there too.
Thank you for your time. I've enjoyed it.
Yep, absolutely. All right, Dustin, how do we learn more about what you're working on?
Pardon me, netchoice.org or datapower.us. You can check that out. DataPower's doing a lot of work on the West, but very hyper-focused on hyperscale data centers, energy policy, water policy. So,
Taylor, you told us once before. Tell us again. How do we find out more about you and Abundance?
Yeah, our site is abundance.institute. My X or Twitter handle is Taylor D. Barkley. And multiple colleagues for having to help you out. Maybe this is a good chance too to plug another resource. I think on the big picture, particularly for artificial intelligence benefits, we created a website called AIopportunities.org, AIopportunities.org. And this is a site we update regularly with real world beneficial AI use cases. So it's not hype, it's not doom and gloom, but it is meant to be a repository, kind of a growing library of how AI right now is helping people in the medical field and education, employment. These are kind of the long tail, kind of the majority story that's happening around in the world. But the headlines are all doom and gloom, focus on the harm and risks, and we should keep those risks and harms in mind. But if we're solely focused on risk and we forget all the positive use cases and benefits, then we're never going to see those benefits come to be. And I think that's the role of the policymaker, is to make sure that public policy is friendly to emerging technologies in particular. And frankly, we also have, start approaching the Abundance Institute. We have a job to do in the culture at the societal level, and to tell that positive story. Because if culture is filled with fear, then that's going to have a public policy and then a long-term impact and detriment to our own quality of life. So AIopportunities.org for your daily dose of good news.
And Rob, when we want to do our Christmas shopping, what site should we go to?
Yeah, I mean, you could. I don't even need a mic for this one. I'm a loud guy. You should buy stuff from Amazon because the stock price will go up, and then I can buy my wife Christmas presents. So do that.
Your prices will go lower.
Yeah, and they will. I'll recommend two things for the group here to read. If you haven't read it, there was an article over the weekend in the New York Times about how Cal State is approaching AI education. Really interesting read that I think speaks to some of what Representative Johnson's talking about in terms of how can we be thoughtful about AI and the next generation, and something that a VP in our shop, Kim Majerus, who's really sharp, said in the article, that it's really our responsibility to help young people use these tools to develop their own critical thinking skills as more than just skill development, but like, how can we use these to help build the next generation of thoughtful, engaged young people? So read that Times article, and then there's an article in the Washington Post a couple days ago that focuses specifically on energy prices, and the headline is something like, "It's not data centers." Now, of course, I'm telling you to go read the article that says it's not my company or my industry's fault that energy prices are going up. I know. But I think what's interesting in there is that there are a couple of studies that are cited that show that the responsibility we all have to one another, kind of to get to Kevin's question, right? What's the responsibility of companies like ours to ratepayers? What's the responsibility of all of us in this system in terms of recognizing that energy prices have gone up in some places? So how can we have a thoughtful conversation that engages expertise in the energy industry and focuses on a very real problem, but doesn't get hyperbolic and doesn't send it to a place that leads to a very sort of not conservative place, which is what we want. We want to approach these things in a small c conservative way and be thoughtful about something that's all going to be with us for a while.
And that article in the Washington Post has a link to the study that Justin mentioned earlier.
Yes.
Which is very granular. There's a ton of dense data in there. So it's not, you don't have to take the article's word for it. There's a lot of evidence to back that up.
You
All
can bring
right.
it up on dates, parties, all the cool stuff, guys.
If you take away nothing else from this panel, take away that North Carolina is a leader. North Carolina is obviously looking to continue to be a leader. And that is not just in the technology. That's interesting. To me, what is better, especially in this day and age, is the optimism and the view of abundance that is coming from North Carolina. I see that as something that is rare in the States now.
Yeah.
And so all of my encouragement, and I pledge all of NetChoice's support, however you guys meet us, we will be here to talk and to help push those abundance policies forward. So thank you all very much, and thank you guys for spending the time with us.